Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our coverage of the latest mission from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. I'm Will Robinson-Smith. I'll be providing our commentary for the duration of this coverage. We are broadcasting, as we always do, from the Spaceflight Now News Bureau here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. Our Stephen Young is running the technical operations of the broadcast. Our Adam Bernstein out in the field getting ready to track the rocket once it launches and is also doing some still photography. And Michael Kane also helping out this evening as well. You may see him pop into the live chat, and if so, be sure to say hello. If you're not following our Ace Photography team on social media site X, you really ought to do so. These are their handles. Adam Bernstein, you can find at ABurnNYC. Michael Kane at MD Kane Jr. I don't do the launch photography for us, but if you'd like to give me a follow as well, I'm at W_Robinson-Smith. In the center of your screen, you're taking a look at a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket sitting at the heart of Space Launch Complex 40, otherwise known as Slick 40. We're T-minus 59 minutes, 17 seconds and counting, less than an hour away from the targeted launch of the Starlink Group 6-37 mission. This will be the 47th dedicated mission launching SpaceX's Starlink V2 mini satellites. Currently, SpaceX is targeting a T0 liftoff time of 8:05 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. For our viewers joining from around the world, that's 01:05 UTC. SpaceX did push back the start of, or the launch opportunity in this window. Its first opportunity was back at 7:27. They opted to shuffle that on to 8:05. If needed, SpaceX does have additional opportunities in this window that lasts until 11:25 p.m. Eastern. Taking a look at the weather here, it has been a gloomy, cloudy, and occasionally a rainy day here on the Space Coast. Weather coming in was not the most ideal for the early part of the window. It has improved a little bit. 45th Weather Squadron forecast 85% odds of favorable weather for liftoff during the window tonight. The primary concern, as you may have guessed from seeing the clouds right there, is the thick cloud layers rule. Now, currently, SpaceX does not have a listed backup window on its website for a 24-hour turnaround time. But per the 45th Weather Squadron, if they do have the availability and decide to try to target liftoff on Monday, well, the weather is noticeably downgraded. There's only a 20% chance of favorable weather in a Monday launch attempt scenario, with the thick cloud layers rule, the surface electric field mill rule, and the disturbed weather rule all coming into play on Monday. So from a weather standpoint, today's a much, much better day. If you'd like to help support our coverage of the space program, and particularly this live broadcast tonight, there's a quick and easy way to do so. Just by hitting the like button. You can also share the stream. And if you haven't already subscribed to the Spaceflight Now YouTube channel here, go ahead and click the subscribe button and ring the notification bell. That way you're updated whenever we have a live broadcast beginning or post videos on our YouTube channel as well. Lots to cover this week, as SpaceX is preparing for a crewed mission from over at Historic Launch Complex 39A, getting ready to send up a Falcon 9 rocket and the quartet of astronauts on the Axiom Space-provided AX-3 mission to the International Space Station. We'll talk about that a little bit more as we get on with the broadcast. And of course, we're also powered by our wonderful channel members, so thanks to all of you who have already supported us with channel membership. We're very happy to have you aboard. For those considering channel membership, it comes with benefits like access to the member-only videos, 4K live views of all the missions we cover from here at the Cape, as well as discounts at our online shop. That's shop.spaceflightnow.com. We'd also love to bring you into the conversation. You can use the YouTube Super Chat feature. It's a great way to not only give us something interesting to talk about or answer some of your questions, but you're also helping to support what we do here at Spaceflight Now, and we're very appreciative of that. We'll also be perusing the live chat as best we can for our channel members and their comments as well. We're now T-minus 54 minutes, 55 seconds and counting. A little less than 20 minutes away from the point at which the launch director would give their go for the starter propellant load for tonight's launch. For those who have not been with us on a recent mission, SpaceX is now providing mission audio ahead of the last 5 minutes of the count, so we will rely on our experience in covering SpaceX and their Falcon 9 flights to guide you through what we're tracking from a visual standpoint and let you know that fueling is on track as best we can. SpaceX is running their countdown from its Hangar X site at NASA's Kennedy Space Center, the facility where they refurbish their Falcon boosters, prepare them for future flights. SpaceX also has support for this launch in part from the control room at their headquarters in Hawthorne, California. Again, tonight's launch of the Starlink 6-37 mission is looking for a liftoff at 8:05 p.m. Eastern, 01:05 UTC. And for those who may not have been with us last night, this is a bit of a wash, rinse, repeat scenario as SpaceX stood down from their launch attempt yesterday. They have, as of yet, not stated the reason for yesterday's scrub, but hopefully the reason has been resolved, as it appears to be, given the fact that they are going for a launch attempt tonight. And they have not needed to roll the rocket back. We're now T-minus 53 minutes, 15 seconds and counting. Do want to thank Christopher Jones for a $2 super chat. Really appreciate that, Christopher. And to one of our channel members, Callistia Lee, for her ongoing generosity, gifting 10 Spaceflight Now memberships. Good to see you again this evening, and thanks for helping to add more people to the Spaceflight Now member family. So if you were one of those who got a channel membership, be sure to give her a thank you in the comments section below, or in the live chat, I should say. We're also getting support from friend Chuck Briggs here, providing us live views of the Falcon 9 here, as well as helping with the tracking a little bit later on tonight. Also be seeing views from our friend P. Karstens with Max Q Productions in just a little bit. We're now T-minus 52 minutes, 18 seconds and counting. Let's go ahead and step through the launch countdown timeline before we start hitting some of those major milestones. Things will get rocking and rolling with the launch director giving their go-ahead for the starter propellant load. That's at T-minus 38 minutes. Again, because we are not being provided with mission audio, we won't hear that call out, but that is the time we're looking for things to move forward. If that go-ahead is given, it'll begin with rocket-grade kerosene, or RP-1, being loaded onto both the first and second stages of the Falcon 9 rocket. At the same time, liquid oxygen will be pumped aboard the first stage. At T-minus 16 minutes, LOX load on the second stage will begin. Before that, though, at about T-minus 20 minutes and 30 seconds, give or take, we'll see the big vent from the strong back as the feed lines are chilled. Good big visual marker that the fueling is happening on time. Also good indication visually of what the wind is like out at the pad. At T-minus 7 minutes, the chill down of the 9 Merlin engines on the Falcon 9 first stage gets underway. It involves flowing a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and the turbo pumps, protecting them from the risk of thermal shock and damage during the startup sequence. About 6 minutes out, the first stage kerosene tank should be full. Then at T-minus 4.5 minutes, we'll see the strong back retract sequence begin. It starts with the clamp arms underneath the Falcon 9's payload fairings opening up. Then the transporter erector, or the strong back, reclines about 1.5 degrees away from the vehicle, stays there until liftoff. At that point, it pulls back in a much more rapid fashion to clear the way for the vertical climb of the Falcon 9. 2 minutes out, liquid oxygen loading should be complete. At that point, the Falcon 9 is fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. In the final 60 seconds, control of the countdown is handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers. The propellant tanks are brought up to flight pressure. 45 seconds out, the launch director will give their go for liftoff. Of course, if the edge ignition command will be issued at T-minus 3 seconds. And if the engines are healthy and ignite, the flight computer will give the command for the hold down clamps to release the vehicle for a liftoff at T0. Currently targeting 8:05 p.m. Eastern, 01:05 UTC. We're now T-minus 49 minutes, 40 seconds and counting. Just a little over 11.5 minutes away from that call on the start of propellant load being given. Want to provide everyone with an update. SpaceX is adjusting the T0 liftoff time. The new targeted liftoff for the Falcon 9 on the Starlink 6-37-minute mission is now 8:52 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 01:52 UTC. We have adjusted our countdown clock as such. We now stand at T-minus 1 hour, 33 minutes on the dot. We're now T-minus 1 hour, 25 minutes, 48 seconds and counting to the currently planned T0 liftoff time for the Starlink 6-37 mission. Just as a reminder, as long as SpaceX has not started the fueling process, they are able to continue to slide back in their launch window, which lasts tonight until 11:25 p.m. Eastern. So as we continue to keep tabs on that and get closer to hopefully seeing the liftoff of that mission, let's go ahead and talk about another big one SpaceX has on tap for this week. The AX-3 mission launch, a quartet of European astronauts heading up to the International Space Station on a mission chartered by Axiom Space aboard a SpaceX Dragon spacecraft. We were expecting by now for the Falcon 9 rocket supporting this launch to have rolled out to the pad there. You're taking a look at Historic Launch Complex 39A here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. As of just about an hour or so ago, Axiom Space did put out a social media post saying that they're still looking forward to the launch on Wednesday of this week, January 17th, and that the dry dress rehearsal is still anticipated to happen on Monday. So we will continue to keep our eyes on Pad 39A and watch for the Falcon 9 supporting that. You can see some blinking lights heading off to the right, going down the ramp there from the pad toward the hangar just off to the right in the darkness there. So as we hear more about when the rollout of the Falcon 9 vehicle happens, setting up both the dry dress rehearsal for the astronauts and the launch team, as well as the static fire test, both of which are expected to happen tomorrow, we will keep you all posted. Now T-minus 1 hour, 23 minutes, 30 seconds and counting. Now T-minus 1 hour, 22 minutes, 42 seconds and counting. As we continue to wait for the launch of this Falcon 9 vehicle, let's go ahead and take a trip around the solar system briefly and look out at our neighbor Jupiter, the closest gas giant to our little blue marble here. Thanks to our friend Pete Carstens with Max Q Productions, getting a view of Jupiter and some of its moons, which have shifted a little bit since we got our celestial view last evening. Of course, the brightest sphere on your screen, that is Jupiter itself. You can see a little dot of a moon just on the edge in the bottom right of Jupiter. That is its moon Io. The far top moon is Callisto, and then the two little moons that you see towards the bottom of the frame, the higher up one is Europa, and just beneath that is Ganymede. Of course, NASA's Europa Clipper is going to be launching later this year, heading out to explore Europa itself. And last year, ESA's JUICE spacecraft launched and will be exploring 3 icy moons that have expected water on them, or some oceans. That won't be arriving to the Jupiter system until right about 2031, so don't expect some pristine photos from that mission for quite some time. T-minus 1 hour, 20 minutes, 11 seconds and counting. You can think of this view of Jupiter as a little bit of a sneak preview of the visibility of the Falcon 9 once it leaves the pad. Fortunately, a lot of the clouds that have been hanging over the state of Florida have drifted away from the vantage point here in Brevard County, or the Space Coast, as it's otherwise known. So at the point at which this Falcon 9 is able to launch tonight, if all stays on track for an 8:52 departure, we should get some pretty nice tracking views from our full team of Adam, Pete, and Chuck. Do want to thank Matt Sleva for a a €2 super chat. Thank you so much, Matt Sleva. And also, if you haven't already, if you could quickly hit the like button, it allows more folks to find this live launch coverage as we get closer to the planned liftoff of the Falcon 9 supporting the Starlink 6-37 mission. Coming up, T-minus 1 hour, 18 minutes, 54 seconds and counting. We're now T-minus 1 hour, 16 minutes, 4 seconds and counting as we continue to track the countdown towards the hopeful liftoff of the Falcon 9 tonight. I want to thank a few more folks for their support this evening. Thanks to Eagle for a $2 super chat. Thank you so much, Eagle, who says, can't wait for future launches. Yes, this is a year where, depending on who you ask within SpaceX, they are aiming for anywhere between 144 to 148, or Elon Musk said 150 launches is what they're hoping to get out of this calendar year. So a lot just from SpaceX themselves. Of course, we also have some rockets making their debut this year, some coming back into service as well. This summer, we are expecting to see the launch debut of Arianespace's Ariane 6 rocket, as well as the return to flight in November of the Vega C rocket, which has been sidelined for well over a year now. Blue Origin also hoping to launch its New Glenn for the very first time later this year. We saw some hardware pass by just this past week heading out to the pad over at the hangar, I should say, at Launch Complex 36 over at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. So they are well through their campaign to try to get that rocket to the pad. Still yet to be determined exactly what the first mission for Blue Origin's New Glenn will be. There's been some thought that it may be NASA's Mars-bound Escapade mission. Although in a podcast appearance earlier this month, Blue Origin founder Jeff Bezos said that that may or may not be their first mission, so we'll have to keep our eye out for what in fact that turns out to be. China-based private company Orion Space had their first launch of their Gravity 1 rocket, powered by solid rocket motors and launching from a barge, which was quite spectacular. And then, of course, it was just about a week and a few hours back now that we had this launch. Of course, the debut of United Launch Alliance's Vulcan rocket on its first certification mission. Shorthand is Cert 1. This photo from our own Adam Bernstein. Getting a great picture here just as the Vulcan was on its way towards clearing the tower. You see those on the side solid rocket boosters, the GEM 63 XL motors from Northrop Grumman. The Vulcan can fly in a variety of configurations with either 0, 2, 4, or 6 of those solid rocket boosters strapped to the side. And of course, it's powered by Blue Origin BE4 engines, which you see those twin engines there, creating some very strikingly blue shock diamonds, as the Vulcan first stage is powered by a combination of methane and liquid oxygen, or methylox. The upper stage, though, still powered by a combination of liquid oxygen, liquid hydrogen, keeping with ULA heritage there. Also, that upper stage powered by a couple of RL-10C1-1A engines. Eventually, the Vulcan will fly the partially 3D printed or additive manufactured RL-10C-X engines, which will power the Atlas V upper stage, or the Centaur V upper stage, I should say. Excuse me there. So yes, lots of interesting novel activity on the launch front this calendar year. Lots to look forward to, including Vulcan's second certification flight, which is potentially coming up as soon as this April, which will launch the Sierra Space Dream Chaser to the International Space Station. ULA is on contract with Sierra Space to launch 6 Dream Chaser missions to the ISS as part of NASA's Commercial Resupply Services Mission Program, or CRS. Of course, we're used to seeing semi-regular flights with Dragon on CRS missions. We were up to 29 with Dragon, coming up on 30 a little bit later this year. But in fact, later this month, we are expecting to see the first time that a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket, which is launching from Pad 40, which you see over there in the live picture on the right-hand side of your screen. A very similar Falcon 9 will be sending up a Cygnus spacecraft up to the space station. As a consequence of the Russian war in Ukraine, the Antares 230 plus rocket needed to be retired because it was powered by Russian-made engines. And so currently, Northrop Grumman is working with Firefly on its future rocket, the Antares 330. That'll be making its debut a little ways down the road. So for now, it's getting its Cygnus spacecraft up to the ISS via a ride from SpaceX and its Falcon 9. Those missions will launch from Pad 40. We're now T-minus 1 hour, 9 minutes, 16 seconds and counting. I want to thank a few more folks for their support this evening. Billy Combs with a $5 super chat. Thank you so much, Billy, who says, thanks for making this more enjoyable for us. Billy and Pam checking in from Flagler Beach here in Florida. Hopefully the cloud cover also drifting away from where you're watching in Flagler Beach, and you'll be able to see this southeasterly trajectory launch from your neck of the woods. Matthew Lowry with a $2 super chat. Thank you, Matthew. Really appreciate your support. Tank Minder with a $5 super chat. Thank you so much, Tank, who says, waiting anxiously in Cape Canaveral to see my first in-person launch. Go Falcon 9. Thanks Spaceflight Now for the coverage. It's always exciting to hear people experiencing their first in-person launch, and things should be fairly clear in Cape Canaveral offsite here as well. So hopefully you've got a good view and you've got a nice blanket or a thick coat. It's a little chilly out there tonight. So bundle up and hopefully we'll have a launch in just a little over an hour from now. And lastly for now, Eliana Belenesi. Apologies if I mispronounced your last name, but thank you so much for gifting a Spaceflight Now membership. Really appreciate sharing the generosity here. We're now T-minus 1 hour, 7 minutes, 46 seconds and counting. We're now T-minus 1 hour, 5 minutes, 35 seconds and counting. As previously mentioned, we've been closely watching the weather, both for yesterday's launch attempt, today's as well, naturally. It's a photo snapped by our Adam Bernstein before the sun set. Beautiful view of some of the clouds rolling over the press site here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. You see the vehicle assembly building, that iconic building off to the right, where NASA stacks its Space Launch System rockets. Clouds, fortunately, have been moving away from the Cape as the evening has gone on. Taking a look at this weather roop where we see some satellite views of the cloud covered there. Again, you see from a different vantage point the clouds drifting away from the launch pad here at the Cape, which is, of course, what we definitely want to see happening. SpaceX has not stated its reason either for them standing down from a launch attempt last night, nor have they said explicitly why they have adjusted the T0 liftoff time now twice for today's launch attempt. T0 liftoff still currently stands as of this singular moment in time at 8:52 p.m. Eastern, 1:52 UTC. Coming up T-minus 1 hour, 3 minutes, 57 seconds and counting. Again, just for some context from a weather perspective, if for whatever reason they do decide that today is not the day and they want to target a launch tomorrow, the weather is considerably worse, with only a 20% chance of favorable weather for liftoff. So from a weather standpoint, you really want to go today if you're SpaceX. Now T-minus 1 hour, 3 minutes, 15 seconds and counting. I want to thank a couple more folks for their support this evening. Pamela Hale with a very generous $20 super chat. Thank you so much, Pamela. Really appreciate that. And also to Mr. Vegas for an equally generous $20 super chat. Thank you so much, Mr. Vegas. Love the handle. Mr. Vegas says, I was lucky to see my first live launch from Cocoa Beach last November 9th in the night sky. A very emotional rush of pride runs through your soul. And there's nothing quite like seeing your very first live launch in person. I still remember the first launch I got to see in person when I moved down here a couple years ago. Fortunately, it was a crewed mission. That was when the quartet of astronauts launched to the ISS on the Crew 2 mission from Launch Complex 39A. It was a spectacular pre-sunrise launch with a gorgeous jellyfish effect. One of the wonderful benefits of getting to catch a launch on a clear sky that's either just after sunset or just before sunrise. And I will echo the sentiment of one of our folks in the live chat, Equilibrium, who says, click the like button. It's free and helps the algorithm. It certainly does. If you haven't already, be sure to click that like button and allow more folks to find this live coverage, as we are now at T-minus 1 hour, 1 minute, 19 seconds and counting. Hopefully we've gone through the last time we need to adjust the T0 for this launch. But of course, SpaceX does have backup opportunities through 11:25 p.m. Eastern tonight. Again, if they have not started fueling. Just want to let you know we are now T-minus 1 hour and counting. Hopefully the last time we are within an hour from the launch Starlink 6-37 mission. And if I haven't already given them their flowers this evening, want to go ahead and either thank for the first time tonight or thank again our wonderful moderators helping us out in the live chat this evening. So thanks to wonderful folks like Rusty Shackelford for helping us answer some questions, making sure that things are keeping kosher in the live chat. So thanks to our mods for all they do. We're now at T-minus 59 minutes, 16 seconds and counting. We're now T-minus 58 minutes, 6 seconds and counting, as we are currently within an hour to the planned liftoff of this Falcon 9 mission. Let's go ahead and re-rack and reset the table, especially for those who may have joined us in the intervening time. I'm Will Robinson Smith for Spaceflight Now. Want to welcome those of you who are popping into the stream now. This is our launch live coverage for the liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket sitting there at the heart of Space Launch Complex 40 over at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. On deck is the launch of the Starlink 6-37 mission, poised to be the 47th dedicated launch of SpaceX's upgraded Starlink V2 mini satellites, the holdover variant until SpaceX is able to use its Starship launch vehicle to launch the full-size, what were going to be the V2 satellites, although SpaceX founder Elon Musk says they may just end up calling them V3s. We'll have to see what they end up going with as far as a naming scheme. T0 liftoff time currently targeting 8:52 p.m. Eastern. That's 01:52 UTC for our friends joining from around the world. Speaking from a weather front, things are looking pretty decent tonight. The Space Launch Delta 45th Weather Squadron forecast 85% odds of favorable weather, with just the thick cloud layers rule being the only limiting item tonight. Taking a look at a photo from our Adam Bernstein, our photographer, who is also going to be out manning one of our tracking cameras tonight. This view from sunset before the clouds fully cleared out. Seeing as we do now have more than 8,200 of you joining now, first off, welcome. Glad to have you aboard. For those who were not with us previously for the countdown timeline rundown, want to give everyone equal footing and an overview of what we are expecting at this point. Again, assuming SpaceX is in a position where they are ready to target liftoff at 8:52 p.m. Eastern. Things will get moving at T-minus 38 minutes with the launch director giving their go for the start of propellant load. If, in fact, that go-ahead is given, that will start at T-minus 35 minutes with a couple of events. Rocket-grade kerosene, or RP-1, will be loaded on board both the first and second stages of the Falcon 9 rocket. At the same time, liquid oxygen will be loaded on board the Falcon 9's first stage. That'll be followed by the event at T-minus 16 minutes when LOX load on the second stage of the vehicle occurs. Before that, we'll see the so-called big vent from the strongback. It happens as the feed lines are chilled. Then at T-minus 7 minutes, they will start the chill down of the 9 Merlin engines on the Falcon 9 first stage. It's a process of flowing a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and the turbo pumps, protecting them from the risk of thermal shock and damage during the startup sequence. 6 minutes out, the first stage kerosene tank should be full. 4.5 minutes out, we'll see the strongback retract sequence begin. We'll also start getting mission audio from SpaceX, so we'll hear the vehicle start to come alive as we see the clamp arms underneath the payload fairings opening up, and then the transporter erector, or the strongback, however you want to phrase it, will recline about 1.5 degrees away from the Falcon 9. Stays in that position until liftoff. At that point, it will pull back in a much more rapid fashion to clear the way for the vertical climb of the Falcon 9. 2 minutes out, liquid oxygen loading should be complete. At that point, the vehicle is fully fueled with 1 million pounds of propellants. In the final 60 seconds, control of the countdown will be handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers. The propellant tanks will be brought up to flight pressure. The launch director gives their go for liftoff at 45 seconds out. The engine ignition command is issued at T-minus 3 seconds. And then, of course, if all 9 engines ignite and are healthy, the flight computer will give the command for the hold-down clamps to release the vehicle at T0. Currently stands at 8:52 p.m. Eastern. We've seen it shuffle a couple of times tonight. We'll continue to monitor that closely if there are any more adjustments that need be made. Again, SpaceX can shuffle that T0 liftoff time if and only if they have not already started fueling. We're now T-minus 52 minutes, 31 seconds and counting. We're now T-minus 50 minutes, 53 seconds and counting. Want to thank a couple more folks for their support this evening. Jill Racine for $1 super chat. Thank you so much, Jill. Really appreciate that. Jonathan Eason with a $2 super chat. Thank you, Jonathan. Who wants to give a shout out to Stephen and the Reed family. So hello to Stephen and the Reeds. As we continue to step through the timeline and get closer to the hopeful start of fueling, I want to go ahead and talk about where the Falcon 9 will be going once it leaves the pad. Again, that go-ahead for the start of propellant load is coming up in just a little over 11.5 minutes. In the meantime, let's talk trajectory, shall we? Of course, the Falcon 9 is going to be launching from pad at Slick 40, or Space Launch Complex 40, over at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. Once it leaves that pad, it will fly in a southeast trajectory towards the Caribbean. Following stage separation, the first stage will land on one of SpaceX's 3 drone ships. The one on deck tonight is a short fall of gravitas. The upper stage will continue on with the Starlink satellites. Fairing halves will jettison just a bit downrange of the map. Will splash down in the ocean under parachutes. SpaceX using its recovery ship Doug to scoop up the fairing halves tonight. Of course, it and the other vessel Bob were named after former NASA astronauts Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley, the duo behind the Demo 2 mission back on May 30th of 2020. In a recent company talk, SpaceX founder Elon Musk talked about the importance of fairing recovery in addition to their booster recovery program. As you see in the slide here, this SpaceX graphic showing one of the parachutes landing underneath, or one of the fairings landing underneath parachutes, I should say. SpaceX notes that it saves about $6 million per recovery, although not super explicit whether that means $6 million per overall recovery operations, as in $6 million per para of payload fairings, or if it's $6 million per payload fairing. Hopefully they clarify that at some point. They also go on to note that they have reflown these payload fairings more than 300 times. This is what the recovery operation looks like as far as bringing the fairings onto the recovery vessel itself. At the time this was taken, the payload fairing that you see hoisted at the center of your screen was flying for its 13th time. One of the important areas where payload fairing reuse has not yet come onto the scene is when it comes to National Security Space Launch, or NSSL missions, or either the National Reconnaissance Office or the U.S. Space Force, managed through the U.S. Space Systems Command. They are currently looking at Falcon fairing reuse for future missions, but that is not something that they have certified just yet, but that is something to watch out for when that process begins. That'll further bring down the cost to launch for these critical national safety missions that SpaceX flies on behalf of the U.S. Space Force. We're now T-minus 46 minutes, 25 seconds and counting. We're now T-minus 43 minutes, 45 seconds and counting. A little less than 6 minutes away from the point at which the launch director would make the call on the start of propellant load, which would begin 3 minutes thereafter. I want to thank a few more folks for their support this evening as we get closer to the hopeful liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket, which will be the 5th flight for SpaceX this year. I want to thank Linky for a $1 super chat. Thank you so much for your support. Wild Purple for a $2 super chat, who says, I missed the reason yesterday why it was scrubbed. Well, the reason you missed it is because SpaceX never said. So, in fact, you did not miss it. They just never gave a reason, which is not atypical of SpaceX to not disclose the reason for a scrub. That said, when it is a scrub for a weather-related reason, usually SpaceX will say as much. So infer from that what you will. But as far as an official reason, SpaceX has not explicitly said why it was scrubbed yesterday, nor explicitly why they have pushed back in the window today, though it may be related to some of the cloud cover we had in the area. But again, without official reasoning, it's a little bit of conjecture, speculation. Also want to thank Eliana Valenci. Again, apologies if I mispronounced your name there, but thank you so much for gifting a Spaceflight Now membership. Really appreciate that. Bit of a joke from Maya Rose. Thank you first off for the $2 super chat. Maya's speculating that it was delayed yesterday because of aliens, which would certainly be something. Thank you to one of our channel members, Bob Witter, for a $3 super chat. Thank you so much, Bob. Glad to have you with us tonight. And to Norman Reitzel, who I believe just yesterday became a channel member. Good to see you again, Norman. And thank you for the $5 super chat there. Glad to have you back, and hopefully tonight will also include a launch. As I was mentioning, one of our channel members, Norman, clarifies his longevity with Spaceflight Now, saying he's been a member with our outlet since the CompuServe days. I'll let you know he got a chuckle out of Stephen Young for that one. So, thanks for being with us as long as you have. Really appreciate that, Norman. Stephen says, I was there. We're now T-minus 39 minutes, 13 seconds and counting. About a minute away from the point at which the launch director will be making the call we're expecting on the start of propellant load. As far as we're aware, the T0 liftoff time remains 8:52 p.m. Eastern, 01:52 UTC. We're now T-minus 36 minutes, 42 seconds and counting. At this point, assuming that SpaceX is in fact targeting that T0 liftoff time of 8:52 p.m., they will have made that call and started propellant load by now, and fueling, if that is still the target T0, will begin in less than a minute and a half. We're now T-minus 35 minutes, 20 seconds and counting. Coming up on the start of fueling, assuming that they are continuing to target that 8:52 liftoff time. As we were mentioning just a little bit ago, it was just about a week ago now that we saw United Launch Alliance launch its Vulcan rocket for the very first time. Its primary payload was the Peregrine lunar lander. This evening, Astrobotics CEO John Thornton providing an extensive update. They've been extraordinarily great about keeping the public in the loop about what's going on with its Peregrine lunar lander, as it encountered a propellant leak issue that caused the lander to unfortunately have to scuttle its plans to create a soft landing on the moon. In a nutshell, obviously Peregrine's not going to be making an attempt to have a soft landing on the moon. Later on this week, we'll be getting a full mission update between both NASA and the Astrobotic team. But in this update, basically John Thornton says that they have been able to test their main propulsion system. They got a 200 millisecond burn, but because the fuel to oxidizer ratio is way off, they are not able to make their long controlled burns, and so they are going to end the mission by bringing Peregrine not quite exactly back to where it started, but it will be brought back to Earth where it will burn up in the atmosphere. So an unfortunate end to this first CLIPS mission that was launched just a week ago with the hopes of having a soft landing on the moon on the 23rd of February. But for those eager to watch a moon-bound mission hopefully have a soft landing, Japan's space agency, JAXA, has its own little lander called SLIM, which is expected to make a landing attempt coming up this Friday. So something to look forward to. We're now T-minus 32 minutes, 3 seconds and counting. At this point, we should start to see some signs of vapor or frost form on the Falcon 9 vehicle if fueling has in fact gotten underway. It's a little hard to tell. It seems like there's some vapor forming near the base of the Falcon 9 first stage. If you take a look at the crew access tower, about two or three sections up where you see that sort of light ring around the base of the rocket where the gradient of the soot sort of shifts around. It appears there's some vapor forming in that area, which suggests that fueling is in fact underway, although it's a little hard to tell conclusively. SpaceX has not... Actually, I spoke 22 seconds too soon. SpaceX has confirmed that propellant load has begun on tonight's mission. So SpaceX is in fact targeting that T0 liftoff time at 8:52 p.m. Eastern. That's coming up in 30 minutes, 35 seconds. We're now T-minus 27 minutes, 22 seconds and counting. At this point, we're a few minutes into the process of helium loading onto the pressure vessels of the first stage. Helium is used to pressurize the main propellant tanks during flight. Coming up at T-minus 25 minutes, they will start loading that cryogenic helium onto the storage tanks on the second stage of the Falcon 9. We're now T-minus 25 minutes, 48 seconds and counting. As we get ready to see this particular Falcon 9 first stage booster launch tonight. It'll be flying on its 12th flight. This is booster tail number 1073. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit about its launch history as we get ready to see its next voyage. First launch back on May 14th, 2022 on its first Starlink mission. That was Group 4-15, sending up 53 version 1.5 Starlink satellites to orbit. That was followed up on June 29th. It was a C-band communications satellite for SES. That was followed up by a pair of Starlink missions. First one, Starlink 4-26 on August 10th, and Starlink 4-35 on September 24th. It was followed by this booster's first lunar supporting mission with the launch of the Hakuto R mission lander on December 11th. The launch went off as planned, but unfortunately, as has been the case with, unfortunately, all privately funded lunar landers up to this particular moment in time, mission failed. This particular lander crash landed on the moon. Up next for this booster was February 7th, when it launched the Amazonas Nexus satellite. This was a Spanish communications satellite for Hipposat. Covers the Americas, Europe, and North Africa. It was followed up by a mission to the International Space Station with the Commercial Resupply Services, or CRS-27 launch. That was back on March 15th. And everything from that point up to now were all Starlink missions. Those were Starlink Group 6-2 on April 19th, 5-11 on June 12th, 6-12 on the 4th, and 6-27 on November 8th. Which brings us up to tonight's mission. Of course, Starlink Group 6-37. Getting ready to lift off. T-minus 23 minutes, 19 seconds and counting. Appreciate the more than 12,000 of you who are joining us for our live launch coverage this evening. If you haven't already, a great way to support us tonight is quick and easy and free. If you just hit the like button, share the stream. It helps more folks to find this live coverage and allows the YouTube algorithm to do its thing and bring this to more folks as we get closer to liftoff. I also want to thank Eagle for $2 super chat. Thank you again, Eagle, who asks how much for a seat on the outside of the rocket. I'd say priceless if I was making a MasterCard joke here. But I'm going to say it'd be the price of a launch, which would be a scrub if you were trying to sit just outside the rocket itself. Also, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the Spaceflight Now YouTube channel here. We're on the cusp of 145,000 subscribers. I feel like we could notch that up to a clean 145 by the time we're done and dusted with this launch. We've got another 21 minutes. I think we can manage that. And of course, to all of our subscribers, if you turn on notifications, you'll get alerted for whenever we do these live launch broadcasts and when we post our new videos to the channel as well. And thank you to the Tomorrow Traveler for our very generous $20 super chat. Thank you, Tomorrow Traveler, who says, thanks for sharing this. We don't miss a single launch now. Watching from Tampa. Glad to help our neighbors on the bay side of the state get a view of the launch on the nights where it may be a little cloudy or you just want a closer view and to be looped in with what's going on with the countdown. As we're now T-minus 21 minutes, 3 seconds and counting. Coming up on 30 seconds away from the start of the big vent. The event that occurs as the feed lines are chilled prior to LOX loading. on the Falcon 9's second stage. And at T-minus 20 minutes, just about 20 seconds there, we saw the big vent begin from the strong back. It's last for the next few minutes. Good visual indication that fueling is in fact moving along on schedule. We're now T-minus 17 minutes, 43 seconds and counting. Nearing the end of the big vent here. Should wrap up in just about a minute or so. As we come to its conclusion, I want to thank a few more folks for their support this evening. Our thanks to Bowls Guy for $5 super chat. Great name. Thank you for the support. Mitchell Wilbur, one of our channel members, for a $20 super chat. Thank you so much, Mitchell, for both being a Spaceflight Now channel member as well as for the very generous super chat, who says, don't know how much we're going to see from Vero Beach. Very cloudy. Glad you're here doing the broadcast. Well, we are more than happy to do so and very much appreciate you supporting us in doing that, Mitchell. Thank you. Tony Staub with a $5 super chat says, thanks from Southwest Florida. Watch the heavy launch from here and hoping to see this tonight. Well, fingers crossed that there's not too much cloud cover and you're able to see it, Tony. Dominic Bracco with a $2 super chat. Thank you, Dominic. Omar with a £4 super chat, or excuse me, £5 super chat, who says, watching from London here. I really appreciate these streams. It is 1:30 a.m. I'm so glad I caught this. Thanks for sharing. Let's go. Well, thanks for either getting up extremely early for the start of a work day or staying up late with us. Now T-minus 16 minutes, 9 seconds and counting. The big vent has wrapped up, and we're just coming into the start of LOX load on the second stage right about now. Our thanks as well to Sarah C., try saying that 3 times fast, for a $10 super chat, who says, Let's launch this baby so I can go inside and paint my toenails. Sounds like a lovely way to wrap up the weekend, get ready for a fresh work week with a little home pedicure. Our thanks to one of our channel members, Callistia Lee, for donating another 10 Spaceflight Now memberships. Really appreciate that, Callistia. If you're one of those who just got channel membership, first off, welcome aboard. Be sure to take advantage of access to the 4K live stream views of this and all the launches we have from here at the Cape, access to our member-only videos, and discounts at our online shop.spaceflightnow.com. Our thanks to another channel member, Butterfly, for a $2 super chat. Thank you, Butterfly, who says, keep looking up, and hopefully in the next 15 minutes we'll have something to look up at. And finally, for now, Pedro Vasquez for a $5 super chat as well. Thank you, Pedro. And thank you to the nearly 14,000 of you watching live. Be sure to hit the like button if you haven't already. That would be a very big help to us here. As we are coming into the last 15 minutes before we launch this Falcon 9, it is only fitting that we go ahead and talk about the vehicle itself. Falcon 9 stands at 70 meters or 229 feet tall and has a diameter of 3.66 meters or 12 feet. Most of that made up by the first stage of the vehicle. Today's first stage booster to date has flown 11 times before, looking to notch its 12th flight before the evening is out. This is booster tail number 1073 in the SpaceX fleet. At the base of the first stage are the 9 Merlin engines, which burn rocket-grade kerosene and liquid oxygen, producing 1.7 million pounds of thrust. Around the engine compartment are those black carbon fiber landing legs that will be used to land the first stage on the drone ship. Tonight, again, they're using a shortfall of gravitas. Above the first stage is the inner stage. It's a composite structure consisting of an aluminum honeycomb core surrounded by carbon fiber. In this inset image on the right-hand side, you see the deployable hypersonic grid fins. These are titanium winglets that provide stability and steering for the Falcon 9 as it comes back through the atmosphere like a big old dart tail first. Because it comes back through its own plume, it starts to build up a little soot on the exterior of the Falcon 9's first stage, which is how we get some of the character that you see here on this and the other flight-proven boosters. At the top of the inner stage are the 3 mechanical latches that attach to the second stage. At first stage main engine cutoff, high-pressure helium is used to release those latches, and 4 pneumatic pushers ensure a clean separation. The second stage engine nozzle is safely housed inside the inner stage adapter until stage separation. Speaking of that second stage, the upper stage of the Falcon 9 is powered by a single modified Merlin engine called a Merlin vacuum engine, or an MVAC engine. It's equipped with a large nozzle, which is optimized for burns in the vacuum of space, hence the name. It produces more than 200,000 pounds of thrust, and it will be fired twice on today's flight, placing the 23 Starlink satellites into their intended orbit. The MVAC engine burns the same propellant mix as the Falcon 9 first stage, LOX and RP-1. It will ignite a third time after the deployment of the Starlink satellites for a deorbit burn, driving the upper stage back into the atmosphere where it will burn up, helping to eliminate the risk of any unnecessary space debris on this mission. Finally, up top are the payload fairings, which are encasing the 23 Starlink satellites. They are made up of a carbon composite material. They are 13.1 meters, or 43 feet tall, and 5.2 meters, or 17.1 feet in diameter. The 2 halves of the payload fairings will be recovered a little bit further down range. They splash down under parachutes, and the recovery vessel, Doug, is going to be the one scooping them out of the Atlantic. And like with the booster, they will be brought back to Port Canaveral here on the Space Coast, where SpaceX will retrieve them. They will be examined, refurbished, and turned around for future use. As SpaceX founder Elon Musk said in a recent talk, they have reused payload fairings in excess of 300 times to date. We are now T-minus 10 minutes, 54 seconds and counting to the launch of SpaceX's 5th flight in 2024. Their 99th within the last 365 days. I like to keep a rolling average going as it gives a more complete picture of the SpaceX launch pace in a holistic way. As we're coming into the final 10 minutes of the count, let's go ahead and talk about the launch timeline for this particular mission. Of course, SpaceX is targeting that T0 liftoff time at 8:52 p.m. Eastern, 01:52 UTC. That'll be followed by T plus 1 minute 12 seconds when the Falcon 9 passes through the point of greatest aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle, otherwise known as max Q. Then at T plus 2 minutes and 25 seconds will be first stage main engine cutoff, or MECO, followed by stage separation 3 seconds later. Then at T plus 2 minutes and 35 seconds will be the Merlin vacuum engine ignition, or second stage engine ignition, SES-1. The payload fairings will jettison at T plus 3 minutes and 7 seconds. Then, a few minutes later, the first stage entry burn begins at T plus 6 minutes and 5 seconds, that burn lasting 22 seconds. It's followed up by the first stage landing burn, a little bit earlier in the timeline than we've seen recently. This coming up at T plus 7 minutes and 51 seconds, with the booster expected to land on the drone ship a short fall of gravitas at T plus 8 minutes and 13 seconds. Usually comes up a little bit closer to about 8.5 minutes. At T plus 8 minutes 39 seconds, we'll see the Merlin vacuum engine cease firing, second stage engine cutoff, or SECO-1. It'll stay in a parking orbit until T plus 53 minutes 21 seconds. Second stage engine will have its second firing for a quick 2-second burn at T plus 53 minutes 21 seconds. It'll set up for a Starlink deployment at T plus 1 hour, 4 minutes, and 39 seconds. Now T minus 7 minutes, 35 seconds now. Just a little over 30 seconds away from the engine chill down sequence beginning, when they flow a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and the turbo pumps, protecting those 9 Merlin engines as they prepare to fire. We're now at T minus 6 minutes, 8 seconds and counting. Want to thank a few more folks for the support as we are coming up on the next big milestone here, which is the strong back retract sequence coming up at T-minus 4.5 minutes. I want to thank Ashley S. for a $10 super chat. Ashley says they are watching in their Tesla on the way home. Hopefully the driver is not watching, or you can just see it through your windshield there. They said, never miss it. Thank you so much for the excellent coverage every time. Thank you so much for your support. Dennis Hammond with a $2 super chat, giving a shout out to Steve Walker. Don Pierce with a $2 super chat as well. Thank you, Don. Christopher Jones with a $2 super chat as well. Thank you, Christopher. PVB Paradise with a $5 super chat. Thank you so much for that. Callistia Lee, encouraging folks to hit the thumbs up / the like button. Let's boost this feed to the top. Thoroughly agree. Now T-minus 5 minutes on the dot here. Thank you to Mud Dauber, one of our channel members, for gifting a Spaceflight Now membership. And finally, for now, to Space Nerd for being our channel member for 2 months, saying we love Spaceflight Now.
So pressurizing for strong back retract.
And we are now getting mission audio and pad views from SpaceX as we are T-minus 4 minutes, 35 seconds and counting. Just a hair away from the start of the strong back retract sequence beginning. Bit of housekeeping here. You'll notice that our countdown clock is a little bit ahead of what you see on the SpaceX feed. Reason for that is our countdown clock is in real time. The feed that you're seeing on SpaceX is coming in on a slight delay. So, of course, we'll be making these call-outs in real time and making the acknowledgement of the discrepancy with SpaceX as it is relevant.
Strong back retract in progress.
Now seeing those clamp arms opening up underneath the payload fairings on the vehicle. Great view of the crew access arm and tower there at Pad 40. SpaceX will be bringing the capability to launch crew missions online at some point in 2024. At one point, there was a thought that the first crewed mission would be what we're about to see on Wednesday, potentially, the AX-3 mission to the International Space Station. However, all the parties involved opted to use the tried and true Launch Complex 39A instead, and so we will have to wait and see which is the first crew to depart from Pad 40 on a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket. Now T-minus 3 minutes, 6 seconds and counting.
Stage 1 LOX load complete.
And you hear that call out for Stage 1 LOX load has wrapped up. Last milestone in the fueling will be Stage 2 LOX loading, which will be followed by ground gas closeouts as well. Things continue to remain on track for a launch at 8:52 p.m. Eastern, 01:52 UTC. And as we're within the final 3 minutes of the count, we'll go ahead and hold off on calling out the support ahead of the launch. Do want to note that I am seeing it. It is very much appreciated, and it will be fully acknowledged once we are on the other side of this launch. But for now, I want to go ahead and keep our focus on the mission at hand as we are within the final 2 minutes before liftoff. Do want to quickly note and thank the more than 31,000 of you that are joining us live tonight.
Stage 2 LOX load complete.
And you hear that call out that LOX load on Stage 2 is complete. Now the Falcon 9 is fully fueled with more than 1 million pounds of propellant. You see the ground gas closeouts, that last bit of venting there. Now T-minus 1 minute, 20 seconds and counting.
Ground gas closeouts.
The other good call out from SpaceX again. The audio we're hearing, like the SpaceX countdown clock, coming in on a slight delay. Now 1 minute to liftoff. Coming up, we'll be hearing the SpaceX launch director giving their final go for liftoff in real time. That's coming up.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
Just a few seconds here. Coming up in less than 10 seconds on the SpaceX feed. "30 seconds.
Go for launch.
And you hear that call out. We are go for launch from the SpaceX launch director with 20 seconds left. 15. And here we go. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Engine ignition and liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket on the Starlink 6-37 mission. The Falcon 9 has cleared the tower. We're getting some great views of the Falcon 9 as it climbs through the clouds over Cape Canaveral. 30 seconds into flight. Let's listen to the roar of those 9 Merlin engines. Now 50 seconds into flight. Merlin engines should be throttling down now as the vehicle approaches max Q, the point of greatest aerodynamic pressure. 1 minute into flight. Getting some great tracking views from our Adam Bernstein here. The call out the Falcon 9 now traveling faster than the speed of sound. The rocket now passing through max Q. We're at T plus 1 minute 32 seconds and counting. Coming up in less than a minute now will be MECO, main engine. Main engine cutoff. That chill down call out you just heard is to condition the Merlin vacuum engine ahead of its burn beginning. Also less than a minute. Some great views here from our tracking camera here at the press site. Now a little over 2 minutes into flight. Main engine cutoff is coming up in 10 seconds. And there you see MECO, followed by stage separation. And we should see that Merlin vacuum engine come on to life in just a moment. Here's the SpaceX view of separation. And you see the lights of the Cape right before the Merlin vacuum engine ignites. Now 3 minutes into flight, you see those titanium winglets unfold from the Falcon 9 first stage. We still got a tracking view from here at the press site. Our Adam Bernstein keeping eyes on the Merlin vacuum engine as it continues its burn, coming up on bearing separation. And there you go. The Starlink satellite's now exposed to the vacuum of space for the first time on this flight. Little over 3.5 minutes into flight now. Coming up our next milestone. I can still see a little glint of the fairings as they fall away. They will drift down under parachutes where they will be scooped up by the recovery vessel Doug tonight. Now T plus 4 minutes and counting into flight. Coming up in just about 2 minutes will be the first stage entry burn. the box you're seeing on your screen right now, the big box is our tracking camera here at the press site. Adam Bernstein watching the second stage and the Merlin vacuum engine continuing on its burn. On the right-hand side, those two views coming from SpaceX. At the bottom is that Merlin vacuum engine from onboard camera views, which are toggling from one side of the upper stage to the other. And then just above that, that dark box is still dark because it's a view from the Falcon 9 first stage, and the entry burn has not begun, which is why we're just seeing darkness for now. We're now T plus 4 minutes, 56 seconds and counting into flight. Still have clear views on the Falcon 9's second stage here. And we're seeing some internal views from the Falcon 9's first stage there on the upper right-hand box. Now 5.5 minutes into flight. Now coming up 6 minutes into flight, in just a few seconds, the entry burn will begin. In real time, that is. Yep. And there you see and hear the call out for the entry burn beginning, the SpaceX feed. This burn lasts 22 seconds. And there you see that first stage entry burn has wrapped up. Coming up, the next milestone as we are coming up on T plus 7 minutes into flight will be the landing burn beginning. That's coming up in about 50 seconds. The booster will then land on the drone ship a shortfall of gravitas at about T plus 8 minutes and 13 seconds. As far as visual markers that we're looking for here, you're going to want to watch the SpaceX clock now at the bottom of your screen, because the events are far enough out and low enough on the horizon we won't be able to see them from our tracking camera views. So we'll rely on SpaceX's onboard cameras here, as well as the cameras on its drone
Stage 1 transonic.
You have the call out that stage 1 is now traveling below the speed of sound. You can see the speed gauge on the stage 1 telemetry continue to plummet as the drone ship makes its way down, or excuse me, as the first stage booster makes its way down to the drone ship. SpaceX going for the 57th
Stage 1 landing burn.
You see the view from the drone ship.
Stage 1 landing leg deploy.
And for the 12th time, look just a tad wobbly
landing confirmed.
for a second, but you see booster 1073 standing tall on the drone ship, a shortfall of gravitas. This was, as I was just mentioning, the 57th landing on this particular drone ship. Waiting for SES-1.
MVAC shutdown.
Excuse me, SECO-1. The Falcon 9 second stage now in a coasting phase, that parking orbit until T plus 53 minutes, 21 seconds, where we'll have a 2-second burn, setting up for the deployment of the Starlink satellites at T plus 1 hour, 4 minutes, and 39 seconds. We had a successful launch, a successful landing for SpaceX. It's 5th of 2024. We'll come up on these mission stats in a moment, but we're taking a live look now back at Slick 40, the pad there. Now, fortunately, devoid of a rocket, and SpaceX can start to turn its attention now more completely here on the East Coast towards its crewed launch of the Axiom 3 mission coming up no earlier than Wednesday of this week. Again, I want to thank some folks for their support tonight. Some of these coming in before and some in the midst of the launch events itself. One of our channel members, I Am Letta, with a $2 super chat. Thank you so much, I Am Letta. Felix JV191 for a $2 super chat, saying go for launch from NOLA. Yes, indeed. Sly Fox 720 Studios with a $2 super chat, who says, love this channel, watching with my niece. That's fantastic. Hope you all enjoyed the live launch coverage. Thank you for supporting it. Mikey Magic Presents with a $2 super chat, saying, we were just at the KSC Hotel last night when it scrubbed. I'm glad you got the opportunity to see it tonight. Hopefully you were also still at the hotel. Great vantage point for watching launches from here at the Cape. Dominic Bracca with a $10 super chat. Thank you so much, Dominic. Asking, why do most rockets go south? Well, for this particular group of Starlink satellites, they fly in a southeasterly trajectory because that sets them up to head into the right inclination for this particular orbital shell. But that is not always the case for rocket launches, as we will see on Wednesday for the Axiom 3 mission. That will be a northeasterly trajectory. We also have some rockets that go just straight due east, but all of them launch out and over water, so they will be some form of an easterly trajectory from here. Just depends on where the final destination is. Thank you for the question. Thank you for the super chat. John Lennon with a $10 super chat, saying thank you for the excellent coverage. Well, thank you, John, for helping to support it. SG with a clapping corgi. Really appreciate that, SG. Good to see you again this evening. Crisby with a $2 super chat. And our channel member, Callistia Lee, joining us again with a $10 super chat. Thank you so much, Callistia. Who says, thank you, Will, mods, and all of Spaceflight Now for another amazing launch coverage. We heart you all. And we heart you back, Callistia. Thanks again for being with us tonight. And before we go ahead and close it out, we will do as we always do and talk about some of the mission stats now that this is done and dusted and we're just waiting for the Starlink satellite deployment confirmation. This was the 12th flight of Falcon 9 booster 1073. This was SpaceX's 290th Falcon 9 launch to date, their 5th Falcon 9 launch of 2024. This was their 235th Falcon booster reflight, or the launch of a booster that has flown at least once. This was SpaceX's 5th overall orbital launch of 2024, their 99th orbital launch in the last 365 days. This was SpaceX's 165th orbital launch from Pad 40, the 220th overall launch from this particular pad. Moving on to some recovery records here. This was the 57th first stage booster landing on the drone ship A Shortfall of Gravitas. This was the 207th overall SpaceX drone ship landing. And this was the 264th Falcon booster landing, a combination of the 3 drone ships and the 3 landing sites on land, both at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station and Vandenberg Space Force Base. And finally, bringing it out to the globe, this was the 4th orbital launch from Florida, the 6th orbital launch from U.S. soil. This was the 6th orbital launch from a U.S. rocket company in 2024, and the 12th orbital launch globally. And now with this launch of the books, this is the bar chart visualization of the SpaceX Falcon family of launches since they began flying in 2010. We're now at 5 on the year, a ways to catch up to last year's record of 96, although SpaceX setting high ambitions for itself of anywhere between 144 to 150 launches that they want to try to hit this year. In fact, Elon Musk challenging the company to achieve a pad turnaround time of 24 hours, which would be quite the feat. And quite the workout for us, too, covering that. But you know that we'll be here when it happens, and we're just counting down the days without knowing when it's coming until it happens. Stephen Young throwing some quasi-ironic jazz hands as he is, I'm sure, waiting with bated breath for that moment when we are here for 24-hour marathon of SpaceX launches. And with that, we're going to go ahead and thank a few more folks for their support. Jeff Lindum with a $5 super chat. Thank you so much, Jeff. Says thank you for the coverage of this launch. And Junior Mesquita with a $2 super chat saying Wednesday launch land at the base or on the drone. SpaceX has shifted its crew-related missions to being return to landing site or land landings. So for folks who are in the Central Florida area, depending on wind direction, cloud cover, all those variables, we may be hearing a sonic boom. Well, we will certainly hear one here at the press site, but depending on how far out you are, you may also hear a sonic boom as that booster returns for a landing back at landing zone 1, which will be the 34th landing at LZ1 when it happens. And with that, 16 and a half minutes into flight, just as a reminder, this is the pad to watch now, which you can always catch views of over on Launchpad Live once this live stream wraps up this evening. SpaceX still has yet to roll out the Falcon 9 rocket in support of the AX-3 mission, sending 4 European astronauts up to the International Space Station. That launch no earlier than Wednesday, though we expected the Falcon 9 to have rolled out by now. The plan, as previously announced, is to go through a dry dress rehearsal as well as a static fire test of the Falcon 9 tomorrow. So we will be keeping a close eye on Pad 39A for signs of the Falcon 9 rollout to the pad there. That mission said to have those astronauts on orbit at the ISS for 14 days. Commander Michael Lopez Alegria making his second flight aboard a SpaceX Crew Dragon spacecraft, second time as a commander and as a private astronaut on behalf of Axiom Space. And with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap things up for this evening. Lots to cover as this week progresses. Artemis conversations on the Hill with lawmakers coming up later this week. As mentioned, the all-important crew astronaut mission with AX-3. We're also waiting to hear more from NASA and Astrobotic on the timing and the science that they're able to get out of the Peregrine lander before it makes its way back to Earth, where it will burn up in the atmosphere, unfortunately bringing that mission to its end. And at the end of the week, though, on a brighter lunar outlook, we do have JAXA's SLIM lander hoping to make a soft lunar landing coming up Friday morning. Lots to cover, lots to keep track of, so if you're not already subscribed to Spaceflight Now here on YouTube, be sure to do so and turn on the notifications so you get alerted when both live streams happen as well as when we post videos, for which you should look out for a number this week. closing things out, want to thank all of our wonderful moderators like Stephanie B. and Dremwolf, who have been hard at work in the live chat. Really appreciate the both of you and our other wonderful moderators who are always coming in clutch for us for these live streams. Again, if you want to hear a roundup of the news with some of those who are closest to covering it, be sure to keep an eye out for News from the Press site, our live show that's coming up on Fridays now every week, now that we're in 2023. Appreciate, as we were hoping to, we have now kicked over 145,000 subscribers. Love to see that number keep ticking up in real time. I think we could make it to 150,000 by week's end. I don't think that's unreasonable. Certainly by the end of the AX3 live stream, I think that is well within the realm of possibility. So a number of live events coming up, so we look forward to seeing our mods back in action for those. Want to thank our friends Pete Karstens with Max Q Productions and Chuck Briggs for helping us with tracking views of the launch tonight. Pete helping to give us a view of Jupiter and its moons. And Chuck as well with ground shots of the Falcon 9. Of course, we have our ace photographers, Adam Bernstein, Michael Kane, working hard on launch photography. If you're not already following them, be sure to do so on X. Here's their handles. Leave that up for a moment here. Our thanks as well to Steve Young for managing the technical aspects of our show, our wonderful editor here at Spaceflight Now. And most importantly, thanks to all of you for joining us this evening for what was fortunately not yet another scrub of the Starlink 6-37 mission, but in fact, the launch that we were all anticipating. I'm Will Robinson Smith. For all of us here at Spaceflight Now, be good to yourself, be good to others, and we will see you next time. Good night.